Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Monday, April 29th, 2024. Time for another show. We got lots going on today, as usual. Let's see. The former guy, farting guy, back in court, I guess, today. Not sure what stage we're at here, but openings should be done. But I guess, I don't know. Well, they've got their witnesses on the stand. That's right. We were talking about David Pecker having been on the stand. I don't know who's up for today. I didn't study the trial schedule. I just know that it's awfully funny that it's going on. Plenty of other things going on over the weekend, of course, to keep us distracted from all of that. Kristi Noem apparently killing every animal in South Dakota and happy about it for whatever reason. And then, of course, the usual. It was a great weekend cycle. I guess she's got a book coming out because she's trying to run for vice president, which is, I don't know, it's a thing. The presidential race was, of course, the nomination race was over a long time ago. There was no chance for anybody else but Trump to compete for the nomination on the Republican side. And so she's doing a vice presidential audition instead. So the book is out, and yeah, for whatever reason, the selected excerpts released early were about her killing all of her animals, which then by the end of the weekend, we got to that usual cycle where others were warning, I guess, everybody else via social media, don't talk about it, because she wants us to talk about it, because she wants to spark liberal outrage so that everybody's talking about her. So now we're going to talk about her and not talk about her, I guess. I don't know. I don't think there's any real good that was going to come out of that. No huge bounce. I don't think there's a giant surge of enthusiasm for Republicans who kill animals, particularly their dogs. I don't know. We don't actually need to discuss the whole thing. Just that's where we are, and she's defending the whole thing as the hard choices. I make the hard choices. I don't shy away from that sort of stuff. So I guess I'll kill you too, perhaps, even if it's difficult. I don't know what we're really supposed to take away from that, but dogs, goats, I don't know. Also, by the way, one of the stories about the goat, I don't know if it was the same day. She needed to shoot the goat because it was smelly, because that's what goats are. But I don't know. She missed, which was amazing. I wouldn't have thought, I did see somebody say, you couldn't have paid me enough to write this as, the rough and tumble, mountain, whatever the hell, I guess on the mountain. Yeah, Mountain West, farmer governor who missed, who shot the goat and had the goat screw him up. All right. So we got that going on. We got the trial resuming. I don't even remember what the hell else we spent the rest of the weekend on, but Greg Dworkin does, and he'll be here to remind us of it. Also, just programming note, I assume everything goes on as usual after today's program, but many of you may have heard via social media. I think he mentioned it was in the abbreviated pundit roundup over the weekend. Justice Putnam, thoughts and, and prayers for those who prefer, for Justice Putnam, whose mom passed away yesterday. He's been taking good care of her for a long time, and it's been a topic of conversation back and forth among us as he gets up and makes everything work in the mornings at 14,000 a.m. in the West Coast. And our condolences to you. Yeah, okay, everything's on track for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Afterwards, we all carry on. But if you are in contact with him, maybe you want to reach out and let him know that you're offering condolences. All right, we got a lot to. I don't want to linger on that. We'll go try and get back to the normal routine as quickly as possible. So, like I said, lots of other things happening. Not the least of which more news about the protests. They continue on campuses around the country, and people continue to look with disfavor at the crackdowns against those. And a lot of these universities that are experiencing it are I guess the first trend was to crack down like Colombia did. And then the second trend was, actually, kind of Colombia is backing off and the publicity is pretty bad and maybe we ought to try a different model. I don't know why everybody decided that that was the one to emulate, but there's another alternative out there. And UCLA, I believe, is the one getting the most publicity in terms of its backing off from regulating, cracking down on, what have you, disfavoring the demonstration and just sort of saying, if it peters out before graduation, terrific. If it peters out after graduation, terrific. Not every campus is in the same position. A lot of times these encampments occupy space that they normally plan to use for commencement ceremonies. So I could see where that might be a problem. But a lot of development from Friday on. And all of that, most of the kids who are protesting are still protesting. Most of the kids who are protesting are still kids. Most of the college students, still college students, though some of them have been bounced from their university for various other reasons. All right, well, Greg Dworkin is here. He'll give you his take on how the weekend went. What'd you watch on TV this weekend, Greg?
Almost nothing.
Okay, excellent. What a great weekend that was.
Yeah.
All right.
Following some sports teams and, that sort of thing. But I have to say, Kristi Noem is an interesting contrast.
Yeah,
because she may have thought she was trying to be the new Sarah Palin.
Yeah, but
it turns out she's the new Sarah Palin.
Well, congratulations. And Sarah Palin...
Not the Sarah Palin that captured conservatives' minds with stars in their eyes after her... convention speech, but rather the Sarah Palin that became a joke.
Killing turkeys in the background.
Whereas she may have thought that this was a good day to own the libs and a good way to do it. It turns out conservatives are really unhappy with it because it makes them look like goat killing, puppy killing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a joke in that sense, right? Everybody says, well, what we'll do is, if she gets too popular, we'll tar her with, she probably would shoot a puppy. Oh, she did shoot a puppy. She's happy about it.
I had to laugh when I saw it because somebody had written on Twitter, if you are caught killing a cat, this is clearly a sign that you are a future serial killer.
Maybe. Yeah.
But if you kill a puppy after 30,000 years of them just learning to love you, there's something terribly wrong with you, and even conservatives won't support that.
I mean, dogs, I just don't understand. It's like,
the contrast just
I hate apple pie, and I kill dogs.
Oh, these are serial killers. Of course, conservatives will support some of them,
that's true.
Rittenhouse and others, but, But puppies,
it's an odd one.
Not even conservatives can go for puppies.
It's hard to imagine justifying it. And, of course, by the way, just the writing was ridiculous. Not only was it a puppy, it was like 14 months old, but she goes on to say that the dog is having the time of its life on this hunt. He was misbehaving, apparently. Misbehaving, I guess, if you had a trained dog. But, yeah.
And then she has to explain it to her daughter.
Yeah, that was kind of amazing. And then part of the passage was
she went back. If you're explaining, you're losing. She went back and explained 4 different times.
Oh my God!
Over the weekend,
I shoved
4 different statements.
Well, yeah, we didn't need. And by the way, I just want to point out that the title of the book is "No Going Back," except 4 times.
Exactly.
That really was something. And then the passage that stuck with me was the dog. I think she describes as the picture of pure joy. Yeah, I hated that dog. I killed it.
The title of the book could have been Killing Puppies the Early Years.
And then, of course, she was surprised to find a billy goat gruff and killed that as well. And then apparently, that's not all I kill. I also kill horses. Oh, wonderful. And I have a serial murder gravel pit. Okay.
It was
that's
terrible
normal.
Any way you look at it.
Terrific. Plus, it's weird that she's had like plastic surgery to look more like a Trump person.
Yeah, my understanding is that the Trump trial doesn't resume till tomorrow.
Ah, okay. Day off.
A day off for I don't know why, but maybe we'll get the ruling on his contempt charges.
Ah, yeah, okay. He may want to have to consider that before going forward. Okay.
The other thing was really interesting. Axios had a piece.
Let's take a look.
Called Swing State Trials.
Swing state
One
trials.
big thing.
Okay.
Look past the former president's day at the Supreme Court, and you'll see the groundwork to deter pro-Trump election plots. Trump's delay might be working, but for Trump's allies, not so much. Pro-Trump lawyers have faced sanctions and censure.
Sucks for them.
Rudy Giuliani might be disbarred. John Eastman might be disbarred. In civil settlement in Wisconsin, former Trump lawyer Kenneth Chesborough and Jim Trupis agreed to never participate in future schemes.
Thanks.
And, Wisconsin still has to decide what they want to do, but at least 5 other states are suing false electors.
That is excellent news. And, of course...
The important thing there, of course, is to identify them as false electors or fake electors and not alternative electors.
Yeah.
Chesborough wanted it.
Well, sure, but he wants also... I'm an alternative legal actor. I'm not doing anything illegal.
Arizona, 11 pro-Trump electors. We talked about that last week. Indicted Wednesday. Georgia, Trump's the star defendant in Fulton County, but there's also 15 other people scheduled to begin in August. During pretrial hearings on Wednesday, Trump was identified as an unindicted co-conspirator. In Nevada,
Michigan.
6 people were indicted in December, including the Nevada GOP chair, for being fake electors.
Yeah.
Trial won't begin before 2025, but still, they've been indicted. And Wisconsin hasn't said.
They have their own slot machine.
They have 10 pro-Trump fake electors from 2020.
Nice. All right. Well, this is good. It's good that several states will have those trials going on. And why not stretch them out? We'll get a couple of them in before the election and then keep reminding people that Republicans are cheaters.
Well, that's as far as the voters go. But as far as the people who are actually pursuing the schemes, the point here, Michael Tester, the managing director of the 65 Project, which pursues legal discipline against lawyers involved in the fake electors efforts, says, I don't think a lot of people are going to sign up for this again.
Yeah.
I mean, if you wind up doing this and you wind up losing your license, what's what's the plus minus
what's
here?
What's the upside on that? Well, if you take over the country, it's great. But
you have to win in order to do that. What if he doesn't win? Then you're screwed.
Fake elector thing is probably going to make people think twice. Others have pointed out that it's a terrific thought. I don't know how it will develop, but since electors in general, like regular ones, tend to be among the state party leadership, elected officials to the state party, the fake electors were too, and all of the courtroom antics they'll have to go through between now and whenever are likely to come out of state party coffers. In many cases, they'll probably hire their own and spend some of their own money. But if they're claiming to have been acting as party officials at the time, they might try and do that in order to get the party to pay.
Not
terrific.
That they need any help. But states like Arizona and Michigan, Arizona in particular, I'm thinking because Kelly Ward, who was the GOP chair at the time, is one of the indictees. And she's awful, not to be confused with Carrie Lake, who's also awful, but not indicted.
Easy to confuse.
But my point is, you've essentially decapitated, Kristi Noem style, your GOP officials. You can't take out all the senior officials and then just replace them with kids and say, okay, no harm, no foul.
They tried it.
It doesn't work that way.
And then they had to take it back in Michigan. And
you've just really ruined a lot of state GOP parties in swing states.
I feel so
because that's where these and that's why it's such a BFD.
Yeah. At the minimum, it leaves them in chaos. No one's sure who's leading what. It may drain their coffers if there are even anything in those coffers at this point. So, and
this
if
is the
that
invisible
doesn't,
stuff
Trump will
voters
steal
don't see
it
right now, but it's going to make a difference.
Yeah.
What's your get out the vote? Well, I don't know.
I'm going to put notes
State
on
parties
paper
can't
airplanes
do it because they're totally
for
blungent. And then, the National Party will have to stay. Well, they can't because all the money's going for Trump's trials.
Yeah. Or just, being stuffed in
Mara
mattresses.
Because Larry Trump's running the place.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, it's not good.
So I'm just saying, these are the things you don't see that are important, and you will see it come November.
Oh, see? Okay. That's true. Lower, just less presence out there, which is fine by me.
Right. So
All
anyway, it was a bad week for Trump, and a lot of it was about the trial, and I think it's going to be another bad week for Trump.
That's good.
He's getting, good polls. He's getting bad polls. Natalie Jackson, who's a poll watcher over at National Journal, probably had the best take, which is basically stop paying attention. It doesn't mean anything. The time will come when it matters.
Is this going to be on the
now
exam?
Is not that time. It's basically a very close race. Adam Bass, reporter from Massachusetts, throws in, if you talk to the locals, all this college stuff and Israel Hamas and this, that, and everything, trials, they care about how much things cost. It's still, it's the economy, stupid, and that's why it's a close race. And it's as simple as that. You can make it complicated if you want to, but that's what's going on here locally. Now, that doesn't mean Biden loses. It means that that's why it's a close race. And so all the stuff that, it was very frustrating. I think I read this the other day when Laksha Jain was talking about the fact that, if Biden has good polls, it doesn't matter. And if Biden does well, it doesn't matter. But if Trump has good polls, that's definitive. And if Trump has a good week or a good decision at the Supreme Court, that clearly changes everything, And it's very frustrating because, none of that's true.
Oh, well,
people are not going to be focusing on the election till September. Their views of the economy will set in stone somewhere around May or June. But as far as who they're going to vote for, a lot of people won't decide till the last minute. And part of the decision is going to be whether to vote at all. And so you can't look, for example, at what's going on with Israel-Gaza now and know for certain how that's going to play out in November. Just too early. So that's one of the reasons why the polls don't mean what they mean. The other thing is that Trump's numbers are basically fixed. He doesn't become more popular. Biden's numbers go up and down based on the individual pollster, whether or not they feel like they have to over-adjust for not getting Trump in 2016, and a lot of them have. So I think a lot of the polls are just flat out wrong because it's a matter of how you weight things. And at the same time, what we can see is Biden's numbers go up and down depending upon whether or not the Democratic coalition, which is always fractious and has been for the, 50 years or more that I've been following politics, Democrats herding cats, all that sort of stuff. You get used to unity under Nancy Pelosi, but that's not typically how it works in the Democratic Party. It's a coalition of different factions who want different things, and there's always going to be an argument, whether it's between the Sanders wing and the Mark Warner wing or whatever. It's always going to be that. And the question is, do you come together in the end? Normally they do. Sometimes they don't. We'll see what happens. And that's all, to keep in mind. So none of it's going to get settled, and you just have to use the fact that it's going to be unsettled. So during that, all of that happening, we have lots of news about what's going on the campuses, especially as you point out, as commencement, gets closer and closer.
Yes.
So that stays in the news. I want to give you 3 stories which kind of put this in perspective. Certainly did for me.
Okay.
The first one comes from the Washington Post.
Okay.
And it points out something that another Washington Post article really highlights, but I'll start with this one.
Why didn't you just highlight it the first time, Washington Post?
This one is called Trump GOP Seize on Campus Protests to Depict Chaos Under Biden.
Okay.
The chaos president is trying to make the claim that, no, there's chaos everywhere. This is part of his caravans, chaos at the border, chaos in the cities, chaos everywhere. Only I, the strong man, can save things. It's garbage.
Okay.
But that's the play. So Republican highlights images of turmoil, though most of the pro-Palestinian demonstrations have been peaceful.
Yes.
So, as you point out, between UCLA, Columbia, some of the Texas campuses, different universities and colleges are handling this differently because there's an issue on each of the campuses. And one of the things to keep in mind is, the strategy. What are you trying to achieve? And the tactics, how are you trying to achieve it?
I see. Okay.
And differences between them. And one of the things that really highlights this is a piece by a former Columbia radical from the 60s.
Oh, okay.
Paul Berman writes and really excellent piece. At Columbia, excuse the students but not the faculty. And he goes on to tell his own history, how he was arrested. He was an SDS guy, that Students for Democratic Society, who turned radical with the Weathermen and, blew up stuff. That's how Bernadette Dorn wound up in prison, the whole history there. So he was a radical. He got arrested for a protest. He passed the night in the Tombs, dismal Manhattan jail. Dankest of cells, morose group of other criminal trespassers. That's what happens. And then there were experiences. He comes back to campus, and his dorm is covered with bloodstains, which he didn't see because he was in jail.
Okay.
And he says, today, these experiences caused me to observe Columbia's new student rebellion through a lens of curious and strange emotions. First, happy, because he supports the spirit for a diluted half minute. And then half a minute later, horrified, first on a simple level, he writes in solidarity with Columbia's harassed Jewish students, and then on a deeper level, as sympathetic adults used to say to us student radicals back in 1968, I agree with your ends, but not with your means. The protests were to try to stop the Vietnam War. And by the means, they meant to applaud our lofty ideals and to deplore our raucous and too raucous riots and mayhem. And he goes on to say, because basically you don't want to elect Richard Nixon and prolong the war because you didn't really think through what you were doing.
Yes.
But these days, he goes on to say, I discover my own views have taken an opposite turn. The way students are protesting isn't the problem. It's their ends. And he's trying to make the point that at the time, back in 1968, he got lectured by all these senior Columbia professors.
Yeah.
Some I knew. I actually recognized some of the names or had contact with them at one time or another. The years. These are guys who spent their formative years in OSS during World War II, fighting fascism. And
Antifa.
Their point was, I don't know what you think you're doing, but if you're empowering Richard Nixon, it ain't right. Because your end might be good, end the war, but your means are going to prolong the war. And so students didn't want to hear that. And he talks about the fact that he had just a respectful back and forth between a lot of these senior professors. And now he feels like those senior professors with the counterpoint aren't there, that the professors are at least as much as the problem as the students, because there's no checks and balances. And if the goal in the end is to harass Jewish students and end the state of Israel, that's your ends. And unlike the Vietnam War, these are not good ends. So the means aren't so good. The ends aren't so good. And that way it's not like 1968. And, this is just really worth thinking about because, what are you doing? He goes on to write that professors were haunted by Germany and its history, which might seem odd in the context of a student strike in 1968 in New York, but nothing's odd. In 1968, the defeat of the Nazis was only 23 years behind us in the era of World War II, and the catastrophe of the Jews hadn't disappeared into the past, not in the professors' eyes. And again, because a lot of them actually fought in the war. They wanted me to understand that Germany's leftists in the 1930s had failed to understand Nazism's danger. Foolish left-wing radicalism had helped undermine German universities, which ought to have been a place of anti-Nazi resistance. They wanted me to understand, all in all, that what people think they're doing might not be what they're actually doing, and in the name of high ideals, society might be weakened and the worst of disasters might be brought about. Of course, that I've always complained that, when the protests first started, they never protest Republicans. And they never protest the Hamas hostage-taking and what happened on October 7th. You can't glorify it. That's what he means when he says, the ends are not.
Yeah, that was, that's, I don't know if that's the ends that most of the students who have since joined the protest have in mind.
I don't know what most, but that's what a lot of the leaders
have posted.
Have said.
It was on the websites. It was part of the initial declarations. That's true. And Columbia has had a high-profile case of a student finally ejected over that.
So he talks about the fact that, the high-minded ends, what Netanyahu, what Likud, what Israel in that sense are doing is just flat out wrong. There's no question about that. But he adds, it has to be acknowledged that ultimately the central issue in the war is Hamas and its goal, which has lately seemed more realistic than anyone among Israel's friends have imagined in years. The goal has always been the eradication of the Israeli state. And the radical students of Columbia, even if not all of them, have shown that at some level, if not at every level, they understand and embrace the goal. Bring in from the river to the sea, and why that's unacceptable. And this is a former radical who's talking. And some people will claim to hear nothing more than a call for human rights for Palestinians. The students, some of them might even have deceived themselves on the matter. But it's as insulting to have the debate about what from the river to the sea means as it is to have a debate about the meaning of the Confederate flag.
Yes, okay.
It's there. Everybody knows what it means. And you can say, no, it means something else to me. It means what it means.
Well, it does. And I'm sure it took some time for some of the people joining in the protest to realize, I'm saying what now?
So he goes on to say, this slogan promises eradication. It is an exciting slogan because it's transgressive. And it's doubly shocking to see how many people rush to excuse the students. But it's an eradication slogan.
Yes, but it rhymes.
It does.
So,
Sort of.
You start, it's not really there's not a great meter to
Not exactly
it,
haiku,
sure.
but,
Right, that's true. But, it makes for good chant, and, I'm sure a lot of people were sort of like, yeah, sure, I mean, you should be free everywhere, man, totally.
So, very interesting article. Then I got the counterpoint article to that from Waldman, defending the students after. That's why it's a good trio.
Oh, okay. Well, good. Well, if you wanted to hear the defense of the students, you're going to have to wait until after this 2-minute break. I'll give you all the reasons you can think of. You got 2 minutes to think of every reason to defend the students, and then see if you got them all. Mix and match after this. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, many things happening, so I understand there's a counterpoint out there somewhere.
There is. Will Bunch wrote a really nice piece in the Philadelphia Inquirer. Storming colleges with riot cops to keep them safe should scare America about what's next. The violent coast-to-coast riot cop crackdown on campus threatens the right for all dissent on the eve of the presidential election. So he ties those things together as it should. History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes gratingly. As a new generation of young people speaks out against attacks on women and children halfway around the world, in Gaza, college administrators from Boston and L.A. are racing to call in heavily armored riot cops to shut down protests encampments at campuses. Now, they've sold these applicants as bastions of academic freedom, open expression, and historic demonstrations that had changed the world. And, of course, when you actually try to do that, they crack down.
Well, yes. That's frequently the case. You
can't burn the village down to keep it safe like they did in Vietnam. And to his point, it's ridiculous that there are snipers on the roof of Ohio colleges.
Yeah, I don't know what.
Not after Kent State. I mean, it's just crazy.
No one
At
knows
the University
why
of Texas in Austin, right-wing authoritarian Greg Abbott ordered a large helmeted brigade of state troopers to march to the heart of the state's flagship campus and shut down a pro-Palestinian protest he'd branded as violent and anti-Semitic even before the event actually started.
Oh, I was just getting ready.
Prosecutors later dropped all criminal charges against 57 UT students. The Barnard students in New York have been unsuspended.
Yes.
There's been corrections as
news.
people, jockey and tilt and try to figure out what's the right, sweet spot to handle these things. Indiana, Ohio State were shocked to look up during the campus protest to see what appeared to be trained police snipers aiming long guns at the action.
Yeah, seems unnecessary.
Indiana official stayed mum. In Ohio, where the volley of National Guard shots killed 4 students at Kent State in 1970, OSU officials called the rooftop officers just spotters before admitting they'd switched to long-range firearms at night once the troopers began using force on the students. Apparently using force on the students wasn't a problem.
I guess not. That didn't bother them.
Right.
Yeah.
And then in
Atlanta,
Atlanta,
dumb.
The same place where Cop City is a big deal and has been a big deal, a local one.
Yeah.
Multiple videos from Emory showed a string of violent arrests, including a young black man who was shot with a taser, even though officers that immobilized him are ready. So all of these things are happening. The overreaction is a big deal. It shouldn't be happening. A lot of the administrators have learned the hard way that their job is not just raising money, and they're absolutely positively not prepared for it.
Yeah. Well, that's certainly evident in many cases.
Right. Now, a few of the claims linking the worst anti-Semitism to the student protests have been disingenuous, such as when some journalists cited a non-student and well-known anti-Semite stationed a block from the Columbia University's main gate as an example of protest or hate speech.
Yes.
Now,
seems right.
this is true and not true. True in the sense that some of the worst of them have been non-campus people.
Yes. Okay.
A block away.
I have heard this.
But you have to walk through that block to get to the school. And so the idea that it's somehow separate and doesn't count is weird if you're from an urban area and you know the area.
Yeah, okay. And of course, the reason that they've stationed themselves there is to insinuate the linkage.
Yeah. Now, you could also point out that when somebody's protesting and they have white hair, they're probably not a student, although they could be a postdoc.
Oh, you mean, okay, gray, like, okay. Like, I thought you were, I'm thinking.
Gray hair.
Yeah. Billy Idol, like that guy.
Oh, white hair sounds nicer. But,
right. Oh, okay.
What I'm saying is some of these people are pretty old, and, they could be a postgrad who just never got a job, but, probably they're not students.
Local cranks.
Local cranks.
Even
so
conservative
absolutely
cranks,
they exist. At the same time, it's part of the mix, and you can't separate it out and say that doesn't count. It very much counts.
Yeah, I mean, all right, I won't suspend a student for it.
No,
they didn't
you can't
do it,
suspend a student. You shouldn't crack down on students for it. But, if you're being bombarded with anti-Semitic language while you're walking to school,
yes,
it's part of the school experience.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, yeah, if you're, when kids are making their choice, right? What's the neighborhood like? Where am I going to be hanging out? An anti-Semitic.
Some of this for the students.
Charges. Yes.
Like the 1968 protester who found himself in the tombs, is a little bit of FAFO.
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, part of civil disobedience is being prepared to be arrested.
That is true.
Not complaining about the fact that you were arrested.
Well, yes. But part of the student experience is complaining about anything. The food is terrible.
Yeah.
And, that's life. In many cases, I think we noted toward the end of last week, in many places, the student organizers are, in fact, preparing people for that and letting people know if the arrests are coming, this is the portion where you have to decide whether you're in on it or not.
Right. So Will Bunch mentions, topping off this perfect storm is a critical failure on the left, which over the last couple of decades has emphasized a particular brand of campus identity politics that didn't take free speech questions seriously, despite warnings from folks who remembered how hard students fought in the 60s and 70s to win those rights. The safe space crowd is now seeing the safety issue turned against them at places like the University of Southern California, where administrators' fear of a Muslim valedictorian led to the cancellation of commencement for 65,000 people. But the biggest problem is a large mass of Americans sitting on the couch and saying absolutely nothing, glued to the Trump court TV, because that's what's on cable.
Yeah.
And don't see this threat at all. Too many boomer Trump-resistant types see the wave of college arrests as a distraction, a sideshow. Trust me, this is the entire ballgame, because he's talking about free speech and how important it is.
Interesting.
It's arguable.
Yeah.
But it's certainly
I heard
important.
the opposite.
And I say, again, it's really difficult to know what kind of effect this has on the election. This isn't 68. I was there in 68. It was central to Nixon's election. Trump's going to try to make it that, but there's too many other things going on, and he's not very good at sticking to a theme. This is a simple enough one. It's lawn, L-A-W-N, order, O-R-D-E-R, law and order. But I don't know that it makes it stick, because, it's hard to do that when you're in court complaining about how unfair the law is.
True. And I mean, one of the differences between this and 68, had Nixon come to the campaign having first fomented his own riot, well, that might mean something too.
Well, that's part of it. But the main thing, of course, is that the protesters, we were all being drafted. We were being sent over to Vietnam to die.
Yes.
These folks aren't getting drafted and being sent off to the Middle East.
That is true.
It's not the same.
No, but there might not be DoorDash to the protest site. So that's not great either. I don't know. This does seem a little bit petty. That's not what they're protesting, of course. But yeah, there's a very different feel about it. And it's a bit of a, for some of them anyway, some of the non-Palestinians, it's a bit of a one-off. And even for the Palestinians, well, they're not there. They're not in Gaza. They may have family there, and that's why they're doing what they're doing. But you're right. There isn't the imminent personal danger of being drafted and sent to the war.
Right. Now, so the main thing on the table, given that that's the case, is so how does this relate to a Chicago 68 Democratic convention? And the answer is we don't know.
Yes.
Too much time between now and then to really, say, oh, well, this is what will happen.
There's
a lot of things that could happen,
I can forget.
But all of them won't.
The conventions I don't remember where they're placed this year.
And
I'll look that up.
We've learned from previous Trump conventions that if you place the protesters in a safe space for them, which happens to be on the other side of town, it doesn't have the same effect.
Yeah. Hey, do you know where the Democratic National Convention is this year?
Well, ain't it in Chicago?
It is.
But I'm saying,
That's not great.
You want to make it into 68. It doesn't mean it's going to be 68.
That is true. We can only you can only do so much. You can use the same place, but there's nothing I can do to make it 1968 again.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So while that's going on, the Trump trials are going on, which kind of undercuts a lot of what he's trying to do.
All right.
And the media is aware, and they're sort of starting to get clued in a little bit. This was really interesting. This is George Stephanopoulos on one of the Sunday shows, and opens his show with a blistering commentary. Bedrock tenets of our democracy are being tested. It was really quite good.
All right.
But, what it was, or how good it was or wasn't, isn't as important as that it happened at all.
Uh-huh.
That's really the important thing, that he took the trouble to go ahead and say this. Stephanopoulos checked off the litany of legal cases against Trump and reminded viewers none of this is normal. Until now, no American president has ever faced criminal trial. No American president has faced criminal indictment for retaining and concealing classified documents. No American president has ever faced a federal indictment or state indictment for trying to overturn an election or been named an unindicted co-conspirator in 2 other states for the same crime. That would be Michigan and Arizona. No American president has faced hundreds of millions of dollars in fines for business fraud, defamation, and sexual abuse. Until now, this is Stephanopoulos on national TV. Yes. Until now, no American presidential race has been more defined by what's happening in courtrooms than what's happening on the campaign trail. The scale of the abnormality is so staggering it can actually become numbing. It's too easy to fall into reflexive habits to treat this as a normal campaign, but that's not what's happening. These bedrock tenets of democracy are being tested in a way we haven't seen since the Civil War. It's a test for the candidates, for those of us in the media, and for all of us as citizens. And he goes on to do the normal show. And that's so true. And so here are the contrasting views. The courts are really going to determine what happens in the election. No, what happens on the campuses is really going to determine what happens on the election. No, it's the price of eggs in
maybe
in Northampton, Massachusetts, that's really going to determine we don't know yet. All of those things are true. None of these things are definitive, determinative, dispositive.
Yes, not yet. We don't know.
Because, your basic median voter is a little bit to the right, a little bit to the left, and very much not paying attention.
Yeah. Well, plenty of time to come up with something else between now and then. And, not certain which one will occupy everyone's minds. And it was an interesting weekend for one side saying the campus stuff is a distraction from the trials. Another saying the trials is a distraction from the
distraction
campus.
from what's going on the campuses.
Right. So it was a taste great, less filling kind of a weekend.
Right. Why not both? Since we're doing memes.
Yeah. All right. Well, so you're saying we'll wait and see.
I'm saying we'll wait and see, which I usually say because usually you have to.
You just if you haven't heard him say that, just wait. You'll see.
Yep.
Okay.
Anyway, you know what? That's most of what I have to say.
That's the end of history.
That's the end of history. It remains interesting to see what's going on in Israel. Lots of protests against Netanyahu. Lots of word out that everybody in the cabinet wants to talk about this peace negotiation hostage deal that Egypt is offering. Hamas is interested. Everybody in the Israeli cabinet is interested. The only person who's not interested in Netanyahu because he needs the war in order to stay in power.
I think so.
So we'll see what happens with that. He threatens a Rafah incursion that hasn't happened yet. And it's very difficult to tell whether it's actually going to happen or it's a bargaining chip to force Hamas to the table, which, if that's what it is okay. As long as they don't go and actually kill everybody.
Certainly compared to actually killing everybody, threatening is better.
If it gets you to the table, yeah.
Well, certainly, fine. Yeah.
I can live with it.
Yeah. Meanwhile, there's also dueling resignation threats. If you do this, I'll resign. If you don't do this, I'll resign.
Oh, I'd love that. I'd like to see them all resign.
Yeah. And also, apparently, a looming threat of international criminal court indictments is threatened anyway. I don't know how much substance there's behind it. They've got
the bottom line there
I don't
remains
know if they're do it.
Netanyahu's awful, Likud is terrible, they're doing all the wrong things, and they've made the problem so much worse, and they continue to do so. And as long as Netanyahu and Likud is in power, there's not going to be any good solution.
Right.
Now, after they're out of power, there still isn't any good solution, but,
that's true, too.
There's no question that they make it worse.
Well, yeah. And it was interesting to see protest returning, not just necessarily focused on, well, we demand the release of the hostages and you're not doing enough / anything at all to get that done, but back to no, we demand elections immediately as well. We want to elect somebody who will make a serious effort at getting this deal brokered. And a recognition that the guy in charge is never going to do that.
Right. So if there are actual ICC international criminal arrest warrants for Netanyahu and leaders,
yes,
that would be kind of interesting in terms of maybe pushing the point that maybe he shouldn't be there.
Yes, and pushing people other countries, third parties, ours included, who have been less than forthright, about calling for his ouster, may find themselves
in International Criminal Court, I suppose.
Yes, that's right. Not the Intercounty Connector, as it sometimes stands for in local parlance, but International Criminal Court. Yeah, well, that's going to be hard to deny and hard to wave away. So we'll see whether those develop. And I don't know, I'm trying to think of any other things that required your commentary, and now I'm trying to. I wish I had thought of this earlier because I think there's something I have in email somewhere where somebody said, "Don't forget to ask Greg about," but we do have Wednesday and Thursday to do it if I can't find it.
Oh,
but
so you don't remember what you were not supposed to forget to ask me.
Right, exactly. And I said, I should, what I can do is I can search my sent email for if I don't, if I forget or if I can remember. Oh man. All right, let's see. It was, listener commentary and why don't we ask? There's no way I'm going to figure it out. I should have thought of this during the break. Okay, well, when I find it during the next break, I can send you an email about it or something like that, and then
I can forget to deal with it on Wednesday. That sounds like a plan.
Yeah, let me see if I can. The only thing I can think of is, do I know who sent it? I think so, and maybe I can search these things. Oh, this is terrible. All right, well, no, I'm not going to waste any more of your time trying to come up with it. Thank you. I appreciate it. And we'll check in again on Wednesday if there's really nothing else.
In summary, trial starts tomorrow for Trump. That's a big deal. What's going on the campuses, keep an open mind and just try to
I found it.
To do some critical thinking about what's going on there, because that's what they're supposed to teach at these universities.
Oh, is that it? I thought it was calculus.
Critical thinking, not FAFO, which is what you wind up learning.
Well,
so what'd you find?
I found something that was from like last Monday that I had said, I hope I can remember on Wednesday, which I didn't, or Thursday, which I didn't, but now it's Monday again. It was Jeremy Freiberger who frequently writes in and sends, did we not discuss this? This was the vote on the Ukraine aid in the House. So going back a ways here, let's see. Last Monday, Greg remarked that the House Republicans' recent vote on the Ukraine aid, in which 112 of them voted no and only 101 of them voted yes. So a majority voting against it.
Majority voted no. So they broke the Hastert rule.
Oh, yes, right. So that it would be used for ads in every swing state, right? You had mentioned that, this becomes an ad. What does he say here? So, put another way, all 210 Democrats who were present and voted to support Ukraine, Europe, democracy, and freedom, while more than half of Republicans voted to support Putin, Russia, and its murderous dictatorship.
Right, because Putin remains unpopular and supporting Ukraine remains popular. And by November, it might be even more obvious because Ukraine should be doing a little better than they are now.
Yes. Now, the point that he was making was that he did a little bit of analysis on the Republican vote breakdown and noticed that, in fact, the swingier the district, to no one's surprise, I guess, but the swingier the district for Republicans, the more likely they were to be among the 101 voting yay on the aid. And it may even have gone out as instruction, well, if it's close for you, and you won't make a difference, vote yes, so that you can't be tagged with it. But of course, our back and forth after that was, well, a lot more districts may find themselves swinging these days, given, let's say, the surprising results in red states on abortion referenda.
Right, exactly right. And the thing is, this is all going to be nationalized anyway.
Yes.
So you may look at it as, well, the swing state person can say that they voted to support Ukraine, and the Democrat can say, look, the Republican Party as a whole voted no. The Republican Party as a whole doesn't want to support Ukraine.
Yeah.
Look at their top of the ticket. The Republican Party as a whole wants to ban IVF, and they want to ban abortion, and don't believe what they're telling you. Watch what they do, not what they say. So it doesn't matter what your representative, who I'm running against, voted for. The fact is, the head of the party and who would be speaker if he wins is voting for it, and that's going to be the ad.
Exactly it. Yes. So I wanted to make sure that point got driven home, because all the elements were there, and we've discussed bits and pieces of it, and so now I can tie all the loose ends of it together.
It used to be the other way. This used to be how Republicans
they're terrible,
campaigned.
but my guy.
They used to say things like, I don't care how reasonably conservative my Democratic opponent sounds, if he wins, he's voting for Nancy Pelosi for Speaker.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
so now
yes.
we've found out about what the other speakerships are like.
Well, now the shoe is on the other foot.
Yeah. So, right. I know you voted this way to be able to claim that you're reasonable, but in the end, you're going to cast a vote for unreasonable leadership. P.S. I also understand that you were given instructions. Hide from your constituents.
Or even, even more bluntly, look, I'm not sure it's you, though I'm not totally sure about you, but it's definitely your party.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
Your party wants to do this.
You're not going to vote
There's no doubting it, and there's no denying it. Here are the words. Yeah. Here's the phrase. Here's the campaign ad. This is what your party wants to do. You're going to have to vote for me to stop it.
Okay. And hopefully people will then go ahead and do
stop
that.
It.
Yeah, hope so. And maybe might even be for another reason, but what good side benefit is you can help take care of Ukraine. If you're motivated by abortion and only sort of about Ukraine, that's all right. We're not going to make it complicated for you. Vote's the same.
This is an AMA TYR, right? Ask me anything that you remember.
Right. And not just because I remember it isn't good, but okay. I remembered that I didn't remember it. That was the key part. Yeah. Okay. I may be too old to be a professor at this point, but who knows? Okay. Well, thank you. I think that at least I got that out and on the record. Okay. Very good. Well, if anything occurs to you, send us a Skype note in the background.
If anything occurs to you, do your best to forget about it.
Yeah. I don't want to hear about it. If it didn't occur to you between the hours of
but that was a good
9 and 10.
And a good point.
I thought so. I'm glad I remembered to remember it. Okay. We'll check in then again on Wednesday.
All right, and by then we'll have more Trump trial to talk about.
Right. Oh, right. Yes,
because that's going to be central to this election.
Well, yeah, and will Wednesday be off day if they're not doing Monday? I'm not certain that it's a hard rule. Wednesdays are off, but we'll see.
Maybe, but what'll happen is that there's going to be a Tuesday.
That's true.
So that's what we'll talk about on Wednesday, because even if Wednesday is off, it'll be off after our show, and if it's on, Tuesday. It'll be on after our show.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about Tuesday on Wednesday.
Okay, good. That'll take care of things. And in the meantime, plenty of other things to wrap up. I have a whole sampling of them here.
Well, that's good. All right, take care, and I'll talk to you Wednesday.
Very good. All right. See you then. So in the meantime, I can tell you about the first thing sitting at the top of the pile in Pocket, which is that the time has come. You knew it would. The time has come for the attempt, I guess, at how did the French say, rapprochement, between, what's his name, Pudding Fingers DeSantis and Trump. You knew this was going to happen, right? Vicious attacks by Trump, and, that's all right with me. Vicious attacks against DeSantis. That drove him out of the race, despite the fact that there was a year or so spent on the notion of, DeSantis is Trump without the idiocy. The guy who knows how government works. Although I don't know why anybody decided that was the case. It was mostly because I guess he was involved in government and wasn't Trump, so they figured he wasn't a clown. But DeSantis's record in government is just not particularly good. Not just because of bad policy, but he just didn't have a great deal of experience, and he was never a really serious person to begin with. He was always sort of bombastic and MAGA-y when he wasn't a nothing. He had a brief career in Congress where he was an unknown backbencher, nothing special about him, conservative, and then discovered that if he, MAGA'd it up, he could move on to a higher profile position like governor of Florida, which it was a, race that there wasn't really anybody that thought he was going to win that race right from the beginning, but he, adopted the MAGA stance, found that it was popular among Republicans in Florida, and rode that and endorsements from Trump to the governorship, but then found that because everything that Trump touches dies, Trump required complete loyalty to him in exchange for the gift of the governorship, is how he viewed it. And running against him for president was just not in his plans. Like, no, you can stay governor of Florida for as long as I don't have anybody else who I want to put in that position. If my kids want to run for governor of Florida, then you're out. But in the meantime, there certainly can't be any rivalry to me. And even as DeSantis attempted to do it by saying, well, I'm not going to criticize Trump. I'm just going to offer myself as what? A better alternative? He's not going to swallow that either. Well, anyway, so they had their falling out in their fight, and Trump disposed of DeSantis as was necessary. And, of course, now, just as post January 6th, though, you might get murdered by the crowds. Kevin, I guess they don't care as much. I guess they care more about the election than you do, right? Kevin McCarthy fearing for his life on January 6th, attempting to get Trump to call off the rioting crowds, and finds out, no, I don't care about you at all. And then some number of weeks later is at Mar-a-Lago to kiss the ring and or the ass of Donald Trump, probably both. And, you would think that after more brutal attacks from Trump and the pudding fingers thing and Meatball Ron and yada yada, surely things will be different this time. No, they're no different. CBS News reports Trump and DeSantis, once GOP rivals, meet in South Florida to talk about the 2024 election. And where do you think that it happened in South Florida in general? Well, anyway, I guess it wasn't necessarily at Mar-a-Lago this time. But at any rate, I guess in between trial dates, Trump made his way back down to Florida. They had their private meeting. Not that much in terms of clarity about what exactly they talked about, but the fact that they talked at all, is enough. And so all the people who have every reason among normal people to stay away from the Trump campaign or to say I'm not gonna get behind that guy are, of course, instead saying, yeah, sure, absolutely, drop your pants. I'll pucker up, and this was always my path to power in the first place. Now my power is much diminished. If I kiss your ass correctly, perhaps you'll put me back up on the pedestal and I can succeed you later after you die and all your kids die and the job is open again. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's just put this correction on the record. So in skimming the CBS News report about this meeting, it is reported that it was the Washington Post that first reported it. So I guess credit where credit is due there. Nothing terribly surprising in their report about it. But I wasn't certain I was going to run all the way through this thing. But maybe we'll give it a moment here. Josh Dawsey is the reporter here. The Washington Post piece titled, Trump and DeSantis meet privately in Florida. And, so they met, we'll put it this way. As Josh Dawsey organized it ahead of time, instead of my winging it, former President Donald Trump and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis met privately Sunday morning in Miami. And is this last Sunday or, I don't know. I guess it was this past Sunday. Now, this is dated April 28th, which is Sunday, yesterday, but at 1:16 p.m., so maybe it's interesting. They met today in Miami, I guess, would be one way of putting it, unless it was the previous Sunday. I don't know. At any rate, this supposedly breaking a years-long chill between the presumptive Republican nominee and his one-time chief primary rival. It's interesting they made him chief. Allies brokered the meeting in hopes of a potential détente between the two men, and Trump's advisors hope DeSantis will tap his donor network to help raise significant sums of money for the general election. That always a concern, of course, even more so for Trump these days because he has burned through all of the money on his criminal defense, but is also hoping to steal even more. Whether or not DeSantis's donor network has any more money that they want to spend on anything DeSantis wants, I don't know. But, people do open up their wallets for the general election, so it's entirely possible. And maybe DeSantis can earn his way back into good graces by handing over money to Trump. That's the kind of guy Trump is. Anything else that I want to note here? One was, I guess in the CBS report, they made note that presumably Trump's people were floating the idea. I don't know exactly where it came from. I don't know if they attributed it that, well, yes, they met, but it was DeSantis who was asking for the meeting. In other words, the opportunity for Trump to say, Ron DeSantis, Meatball Ron was begging me for a meeting. Please let me back into your good graces. Let me please make it up to you. I'm so sorry for what I did to you. I'm sure it was the play. I don't know whether that's really the case or not. Apparently, though, both reports agree that it was a meeting orchestrated by one Steve Witkoff, described in the Washington Post article as a Florida real estate investor and developer, both men know, and that he attended. Witkoff called the former president's team and asked them if they would meet with DeSantis, a person familiar with the matter said, and so that comports with the story. He was begging me. Trump and DeSantis had not spoken since the end of a bruising primary season where DeSantis dropped out after a disappointing finish in Iowa, which of course is first out of the box. Anyway, that following months of attacks from Trump and his supporters, DeSantis offered a video endorsing Trump on the day he left the race. He probably couldn't bring himself to say it live without choking, breaking down, crying, I don't know, turning into a meatball. Who cares what he said in his video? But DeSantis has not campaigned for Trump or helped him since, and in fact has made backhanded criticisms of Trump. DeSantis was stung by how Trump and his team treated him during the primary. Boo-hoo, people close to the Florida governor said. In a call with supporters in February after dropping out, DeSantis said Trump had political baggage and criticized some in Trump's orbit. Not surprising. That's easy enough to do. And then, of course, in response, at the time, Chris Lasivita, top aide to Trump, called DeSantis a sad little man. DeSantis is widely loathed inside Trump's orbit, but the former president has shown a willingness to be forgiving and remarkably transactional, which, when it benefits him. Will I be using the name Ron DeSanctimonious, he said after DeSantis endorsed him. I said that name is officially retired, if he gives me some money or gets other people to cough up some money for me. We'll see whether any of that works out. Okay, so that was, like I said, sitting at the top of Pocket this morning. Let's go back and see what else I had put aside for discussion today, because I can't remember for 1 minute to the next. Okay. Yes, and a couple of social media posts too, which, let's see, are these going to be helpful at this point in the game? Probably not. Let's see. I'm just trying to skim through these things and try and decide which ones need to be on the record. Oh, okay. Well, a couple of long reads and a few other interesting items along the way. Here's a short one that I think will be important. We talked a couple of, it was like a couple weeks ago, not that long ago, about the effort in Nebraska to change the rules about their allocation of their electoral votes, if electoral votes count for anything anymore, because now you can just forge them. Your AI will cast your electoral votes from now on, and it doesn't really matter who wins or loses any election, since you can make anything up and there's no consequences, except for, of course, the several states in which those people are now being indicted, but no consequences in terms of convictions yet, but the wheels turn slowly. But while they're turning, everybody runs around and says, well, I guess nothing's happening. Anyway, as we mentioned, Nebraska interested in changing its rules, and then eyes turn to Maine, which is the only other state to apportion its electoral votes in similar fashion, that is, splitting it up by congressional district. rather than winner takes all statewide. Well, people wondered if Nebraska changes its system to winner take all, will Maine do the same, such that it was, I guess, anticipated? Well, there's one electoral vote that Democrats can compete for in Nebraska, and there's likewise at the moment one Republican electoral vote up for grabs in the more conservative environs of Maine. But if they both went to winner take all, it would be a wash. But then Maine initially said, we don't care what you do in Nebraska. We don't want to change our system here in Maine. Now, I guess a slightly different take is proposed. A Maine lawmaker who warns Nebraska not to monkey with its electoral votes. We'll see if this is a person who can actually make things happen in Maine or not. The Maine State House Majority Leader, well, I guess so, says that if Nebraska tries to help Donald Trump, Maine may act to boost Joe Biden. That's probably not the way they really wanted the whole thing framed, but I guess that's really at bottom what's going on. Steve Collins writing this for the Sun Journal, which presumably is in Maine, because otherwise it would make very little sense to cover things this closely. But perhaps those of you in Maine recognize the Sun Journal and can even tell us what the base of operation is for the Sun Journal. All I can tell you is that according to their logo here, they've been around since 1847, which is true of most people in Maine, as it turns out. Anyway, if Nebraska Republicans revise their state's method of awarding presidential electors to help Donald Trump, and that's what it's about, in November, Maine might match the change to boost President Joe Biden's re-election prospects. Nebraska's governor, Jim Pillen, says he's open to calling a special legislative session to push through the change. And by the way, that's indicative of just how, targeted the effort really is to call a special legislative session. It's not like, well, we've been thinking about this for a long time and we've wanted to make that change. Well, you had your legislative session to do it, but now you figured out that Donald Trump needs every bit of help he can get, and you're going to call a special session for one electoral vote. Come on. Anyway, he said he's open to calling that to push through the change, but only if he's sure it will pass. He doesn't want to waste any time trying. It isn't clear whether the idea has enough support, but Democrats are concerned. Now, if Nebraska's Republican governor and Republican-controlled legislature were to change their electoral system this late in the cycle in order to unfairly award Donald Trump an additional electoral vote, I think the Maine legislature would be compelled to act in order to restore fairness to our country's electoral system, says State House Majority Leader Maureen Terry, a Gorham Democrat, in a prepared statement on Friday. And I'm glad someone was prepared, because it's not me. Both states award 2 electoral votes to whichever presidential candidate wins the statewide tally, and then allocate 1 for each congressional district, awarded to the contender who wins that district. In practical terms, Maine typically votes for the Democratic presidential hopeful, while Nebraska votes for the GOPS nominee, but each state has 1 congressional district that the majority can't count on. In Nebraska in 2020, Biden got 1 electoral vote, while Trump picked up 1 in Maine by winning its 2nd congressional district. Nebraska's Republican leadership is pushing for the state to change its system this year to give all of its electoral votes to the statewide winner, the way it's done in 48 other states. Maine, the only other state with a process like Nebraska's, has awarded electoral votes by congressional districts since 1972. Not until 2016, when Trump first won the 2nd district, had the winners in each district been different in the Pine Tree State. I did not know that. Maine hasn't had any serious effort to revise its longstanding system despite Democratic control of the governorship and legislature since the 2018 election. But Nebraska is still weighing whether to rush through a revision this year to give Trump an extra electoral vote, which could make the difference in some election day scenarios. Terry said that Nebraska should not try it, Voters in Maine and voters in Maine's 2nd Congressional District value their independence, but they also value fairness in playing by the rules, Terry said. It is my hope and the hope of my colleagues in Maine that the Nebraska Republican Party decides not to make this desperate and ill-fated attempt to sway the 2024 election. Maine has agreed to award its 4 electoral votes to the nationwide popular vote winner if enough other states also agree to do so. So far, the National Compact does not have enough backing to take effect. So they have contemplated a change in the past, but only as part of this National Compact to have all states who are parties to the compact anyway award all of their electoral votes to the national vote winner. So anyway, just something to keep an eye on in that scenario. And originally the word was that they really just didn't want to contemplate that, but I guess they didn't ask the state legislative majority leader. That would be an important piece of input to get in all of that. All right, let's see. A couple of other items to discuss. Let's see. I want to roll back a little bit further and pick up on some of the things that we haven't discussed yet. Oh, yes, this one will probably require like a whole segment and everything. Here's another short item that I meant to give to you before the weekend, but you can now have the entire week to discuss it. Here's a weird thing. Trump's a weird guy. I don't know if you know that. And he does weird things. And one of the weird things is highlighted here by Philip Bump. We haven't heard from him in a while, though he's been quite vocal and been writing all through this. But for some reason, we haven't turned our eyes back to him. But this one is about weird Trump behavior. So why not do this? Asking this question in the headline, why is Trump giving anyone really, but in this case, someone prominent, a key to the White House? That's not a thing, for one thing. For another, this is something that you're used to seeing, mayors, particularly mayors of, I guess most prominently mayors of big cities, but any mayor, I guess, can do the same thing. But, they give out ceremonial keys to the city. Somebody has done something, noteworthy, or they are a local and they've done something noteworthy nationally. So you get the keys to the city, a visiting dignitary, what have you. Well, Trump, I guess, sort of jealous of that sort of petty officialdom and of trinkets, particularly trinkets that can be painted gold, as ceremonial keys to the city sometimes are, has decided he needs to have the same thing, but he can't give out keys to the city of Washington, D.C., because Washington has a mayor. So what are we going to do? Well, the White House. I'll give out keys to the White House. Dumb, pointless, not a thing, but okay, I guess I can sort of understand that. There's all sorts of things you could be giving out as presidential trinkets, but he wants that one because, it looks important-ish and is ceremonial and is golden. But it gets that much weirder when, let's say, you're no longer president and you are still handing out keys to the White House, which isn't yours and never was. Let's let Philip Bump express his organized thoughts about that. But from January 20th, 2017 until January 20th, 2021, Donald Trump was president of the United States, it is alleged here. This is a position that includes many perks offered to the person who was selected by American voters, though he was not, to serve as chief executive. Perhaps the most impressive of those perks is use of the White House, the executive mansion, a residence and office building that serves as a command center for whoever receives a majority of the electoral votes cast in the most recent election. Trump never seemed to consider his occupation of the White House as transitory any more than he considered the presidency in that way. He has that difficulty distinguishing between ownership and possession. But he looked at both, of course, through as though They were pieces of property that he had come into possession of and that he could only lose if he chose to do so. Because the White House belongs to the American public, not any particular politician, presidents had for years been, careful about keeping electoral politics out of the building. Not Trump. He gave his 2020 convention speech from the building. The fact is, we are here, that is, the White House, and they're not, Trump said. To me, one of the most beautiful buildings anywhere in the world that is not a building. He's such a dummy. I can't take it. I wasn't even doing his voice, but now I'm hearing it in my head. The fact is, we are here, and they're not. To me, one of the most beautiful buildings anywhere in the world that is not a building. It's a home, as far as I'm concerned. Not even a house. It's a home. He's like scrambling for things to say about the White House, which, of course, I think he called it a, S-hole at some point. He kept criticizing the White House as a dump. But then, at a convention, he's got to be, pro-American happy talk. So there you go. But what does that even mean? It's one of the most beautiful buildings anywhere in the world that's not a building. Okay. Anyway, the point is he regarded it as his home, which of course, it is only in the most abstract sense and only temporarily. But Trump's sense of ownership in the building extended even to a souvenir that he had created, a key to the White House. In his book, Breaking History, Trump advisor and son-in-law Jared Kushner was privately appalled and described the tchotchke, and it is evident that he's privately appalled here, when Trump met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, of all people. He whipped out his signature gift, an oversized bronze key to the White House in a wooden box carved with the presidential seal. I'm sure it was laser engraved so that it was super cheap. Trump had designed the key himself to give to special guests. I designed it myself. It looks like every other freaking key to the city, ceremonial key that's ever been given out. What a great design that is. Anyway, apparently at the ceremony, which isn't a ceremony, he said, "This is the first key I'm giving to anyone." He said, "Even when I'm not president anymore, you can walk up to the front gate of the White House and present it, and they will let you in." Of course not. Of course not. And he knew it when he said it. It's just indicative of more of his insanity. Why bother saying something so obviously untrue? Anyway, Kushner, it says, writes that he tried to keep from laughing at the presentation. Understandably. It is not the case that presidents can simply grant other people lifetime access to the White House. Not only because of the security implications, but again, because the House isn't the president's to offer to others. Trump was allowed to stay there by the people, barely. That grant isn't transferable. But at least he was president then. At least he was living in the White House. That is no longer the case. So why is he still giving out those keys? And maybe even making the same promise. On Tuesday, this last week, Trump left the Manhattan courthouse where he attended his criminal trial and headed uptown to Trump Tower. And there he had a meeting with former Japanese Prime Minister Taro Aso. Why? I'm not sure. But reminder also, the meeting was being held at Trump Tower. He's giving out keys, not to Trump Tower, but to the White House, where he does not live anymore. This meeting with Taro Aso was part of Trump's increasingly explicit shadow diplomacy efforts, his entanglements with foreign leaders aimed at building relationships and positioning himself on the international stage as he seeks re-election to the presidency. Trump's presidential campaign sent reporters a, quote, readout of his meeting, which is not something that he would ever distribute when he was president, but he knows is presidential looking. So he sent around a readout of his meeting with Aso, itself a mirror of how presidents summarize meetings with foreign leaders, and included the photo below, which is with, I guess, the two of them. with the key mounted on a plaque this time and standing in front of that super gaudy golden door that I think maybe leads from, perhaps, is it the elevator lobby to his apartment, although this may be inside the doors. And this is on your way out, here, or maybe he's just arrived. Here you go. Here's a stupid key. Yes, Trump also gave a key to the White House at this stupid meeting. Whether he offered the same patter about Asso presenting the key at the White House gates is unknown. A question sent to the campaign about the encounter did not receive a response, but this is, simply put, bizarre. Mayors give out keys to their cities to noteworthy individuals as a symbolic gesture, but it seems safe to say that they generally stop doing so once they leave office. After all, the city isn't theirs to offer up. And yet, here's Donald Trump acting as though he's simply renting out the White House to President Biden and letting Asso know that he's welcome to stop by and use the bowling alley anyway. Part of it, certainly, is Trump trying to give the impression that he gave at the Republican convention in 2020, precisely that the power of the presidency is his, even if it's somewhat out of reach for a moment. He's just Napoleon Bonaparte, wandering the streets of Elba in his signature hat and giving people keys to the Elysee. Okay. He'll be back. All right. There's, my pronunciation, of course, is what it is. There's an interesting footnote worth mentioning here. In September, one of these keys went up for auction, selling for about $3,700. The key came from, quote, the personal collection of a very high-ranking member of President Donald Trump's inner circle, who needs fast cash, apparently. The site said, noting that such keys were specially made for and presented to foreign dignitaries and other VIPs during the Trump-Pence administration. And afterward, it seems, as long as they were in stock. A better gift for Asso than, say, sneakers or an NFT, certainly. But the auction does raise interesting questions. Is $3,700 a fair price to pay for unlimited lifetime access to the White House? As though we're Dave and Buster's or something like that. Anyway, weird story. And Trump, weird guy. Not much more you can say about that. All right, let's see. A couple of other interesting items to share. Any of them that will fit in before the break? Golly, I don't know. Let's see. I'll scroll back up towards the top here. And I don't know whether we can make this one fit or not, but going to read it anyway. Something that's been sitting in pocket for a little while from Greg Sargent, and a tip-off about one of his podcasts for the New Republic. So I guess it's not all that long a written item, but I just thought it was an interesting headline, noteworthy. This, of course, from April 25th. So really sort of still fallout from the House vote on Ukraine, and Murdery Trader Green and her anger about that. For which he offers an interesting note. The headline here, MAGA rage at Mike Johnson suddenly takes a dark and dangerous turn. As everybody sort of thought it might. Murdery Trader Green, of course, my favorite pick for secret QAnon assassin who actually happens to have a member's pin and therefore access to the most secure parts of the Capitol. If for some reason she were to, let's say, decide to carry weapons with her that day, evade the metal detectors, and enable that dark and dangerous turn, no one knows for sure. The subheader here reads, with a range of MAGA personalities erupting at the speaker over Ukraine aid, it's time to take seriously the signals they're sending about what a second Trump presidency would look like. It's not about the assassination angle, except, of course, that Trump did spend last week in front of the Supreme Court arguing that he could, in fact, order assassinations as president. And who knows, maybe as long as he's got any of those White House keys around, he too would be entitled to order assassinations whether he was president or not. But in summarizing, I guess, the activity of in the podcast that is attached to this, Greg Sargent writes, now that the House has passed military aid to Ukraine, MAGA personalities like Donald Trump Jr., he's really? Okay, and Tucker Carlson have joined murdery traitor Green in attacking House Speaker Mike Johnson as a traitor to the cause. Yet this isn't just typical right-wing ranting. It reveals very specific expectations of what Donald Trump would do to our international alliances if he wins back the White House. Always worth keeping in mind there. We talked, or that is to say Greg did, to A.B. Stoddard, columnist at The Bulwark and author of a new piece digging into these dynamics about what this MAGA vision for the world really looks like and why a second Trump term would be so dangerous. So I'll refer you to that and refer you as well to the piece in The Bulwark, which I don't think we have read. Johnson will pay for defying Trump on Ukraine.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Ready to race through a few more things here before we give up the microphone for the day. Because I teased it, I thought I might read through this Bulwark piece from A.B. Stoddard, the one who appears on that podcast with Greg Sargent talking about this dark and dangerous turn among the MAGA types. This probably a good foreshadowing of fights to come that might become relevant in trying to figure out who's going to be in control of Congress, not just which party will be the majority, but what will happen in either scenario, whichever party winds up with the majority. It's not clear that if a Republican majority were to materialize that they would be able to function as a majority, since they haven't been able to do so in this Congress at any point. So what does that mean? Johnson will pay for defying Trump on Ukraine. This subheader here says, an election year provocation that won't be forgotten. As Mike Johnson unburdened the weight of an embattled nation from his shoulders last week, Donald Trump was adjusting to life as a criminal defendant, mortified and miserable in a New York courtroom. Speaker Johnson handed Ukraine, President Biden, and the free world a victory against Russia's aggression. He said he believed in sacrificing personally to do the right thing in the threat our enemies coordinating in China, Iran, and Russia poses to Europe and the United States in the intelligence he received. To Trump, this is an abomination. Placing country over party or self, the importance of the rules-based international order, being on the right side of history, all of that's just for suckers. And trusting the deep state, outrageous. Johnson was bathed in bipartisan international praise for his defection, plaudits from Mike Pence, who cares, National Review, Hugh Hewitt, really, who cares about any of that, and the Wall Street Journal, okay, for his leadership, twisted the knife. He has taken all the attention from Trump and been lauded and praised for something righteous and big, while the petty criminal defendant, focused as ever only on himself, looks so small. This no longer happens, ever. The GOP exists now to win, not to win elections or to govern at all, but to serve Trump's needs. Their donations are his donations. His criminal charges are their political liability. No one steals the spotlight. Everything is defined through the prism of him winning, Biden losing, and, quote, loyalty, how Trump is being treated by the media, the Democrats, the Biden Department of Justice, the rhinos, judges, etc. Policies can be abandoned, but on pleasing Vladimir Putin and threatening NATO, Trump has never wavered. And now, 6 months before the election, some Republicans have dared to contradict Trump's worldview, to side with Biden, to defend Ukraine, and to make Putin mad. What else? Let's see. Johnson says here, I believe Xi Jinping, and Vladimir Putin and Iran really are an axis of evil. Oh boy. I think they're in coordination on this, and that may be true. I think that Vladimir Putin would continue to march through Europe if he were allowed, Johnson said. MAGA declared a state of emergency for the GOP as soon as Ukraine aid passed the House on Saturday. Johnson and Republicans who support aid were excoriated for working with Democrats who helped pass the GOP rule and then the package of aid bills. Hardliners, Trump lieutenants, and MAGA voices raced online and to the airwaves to isolate Johnson as a Democrat, interestingly enough, a traitor, a disgrace. Representative Eric Burleson, who I've never heard of, lamented, I don't even recognize the person I once called a friend. Johnson isn't likely to lose his job. Trump thinks Republicans firing another House Speaker is bad for his campaign. Most House Republicans realize no one else can do the job either, and Democrats are likely to step in to avert the chaos of another GOP speakership search. Indeed, Johnson was written off as a lame duck months ago. Before his change of heart on Ukraine, it was already clear the volatile GOP conference will shuffle their leadership again next January, whether in the majority or in the minority, but Speaker Johnson will remain a permanent target. Calling out an axis of evil made him the target of an axis of MAGA, Steve Bannon, Tucker Carlson, and Donald Trump Jr. Bannon called Johnson a good man, but he must go. And remember, where does axis of evil even come from? That whole thing is now abandoned by the Republicans, huh? Carlson described Johnson as a host for evil. Holy moly. He said on Joe Rogan's podcast, because he had to go on a show that people were listening to, I guess. Although why they're listening to that, I don't know. That what Johnson did was absolutely crazy. Carlson added, but it's not because he's evil, it's because he's weak and therefore susceptible to evil. Ah, okay. Carlson also recently asked in an interview he did with Marjorie Taylor Greene if Johnson was being blackmailed to do the bidding of the left. He posted a fundraising email of Johnson's and wrote, there aren't many political fundraising pitches more corrupt and harmful than this one. I don't know. Donald Trump Jr. Didn't name Johnson, but released a video of him making multiple promises to secure the border and wrote on Twitter, pay close attention to those that don't seem bothered by this. They're not our friends. Again, not naming Johnson. DJT Jr. went after him, along with House Foreign Relations Committee Chairman Michael McCall, asking, why are these GOP leadership losers like McCall pushing a bill that would do the bidding of Democrats and hurt my father's ability to negotiate an end to the war between Russia and Ukraine? Well, he can't. He's not president. It's not confusing to those MAGA obsessives for whom DJT Jr.'s videos are appointment streaming. Johnson is a leadership loser who has betrayed MAGA and Trump. In ways seen and unseen, Johnson will be punished for his disobedience, and Johnson's not alone. Newt Gingrich, in defending Johnson, also broke with Trump on the war. I believe we have to defeat Putin, period, whatever it takes. If Putin wins in Ukraine, the next stage will be Putin in the 3 Baltic states and Poland, and then we'll be faced with a genuine world war, he told Politico. Some current members even called out their anti-Ukraine colleagues as Kremlin messengers, actively rooting for Putin. True. Representative Don Bacon said that arguments made by Green that Russia is fighting for Christianity are propaganda. He added, unfortunately, a few of my colleagues would like to see the Russians win. I don't know why that's the case. I think it's a terrible thing. Dan Crenshaw agreed. I guess their reasoning is they want Russia to win so badly that they want to oust the speaker over it. I mean, that's a strange position to take, to say the least. 2 of the top 4 National Security Committee chairmen who helped convince Johnson to risk it all for Ukraine warned of Russian propaganda infecting the House GOP last month. For Republicans to call out their House colleagues on this, as well as their backing of Putin, is extraordinary. That's true. And I do remind you that I think still parked somewhere, although maybe, no, yeah, we finally did get to it, but now parked in the archives of our pocket collection is the piece wondering aloud whether Russians were in fact buying politicians around the world. And the article speaks of outright bribing of politicians all over Europe. But as I recall, the piece is illustrated with a photo of murdery traitor Green, which is kind of interesting because I don't think they ever get around to directly alleging that she had been bribed in any way by the Russians. Just made people wonder, which I thought was an interesting gambit there. There's more in this article here. The anger at Johnson, McCall, and those who championed Ukraine's defense and Russia's defeat isn't going to fade. In an election year, MAGA can't spare an ounce of fury. The Washington Post reported that Matt Gaetz threatened both Johnson and rank-and-file members in a meeting last week, saying the speaker would lose his job and cautioning other Republicans that if they backed Johnson's plan, hardliners would attack them on social media and endorse primary challengers. Probably true. Gaetz spoke on the current situation in the House GOP conference in apocalyptic terms on his podcast. The risk that 1 or 2 of my corrupt Republican colleagues, the guy who's under investigation for statutory rape, says, might take a bribe, take a walk, feign an ailment, and flip this thing to Democrats is a risk that is too high for me at this time. If Democrats took the majority, their first act, Gaetz said, would be declaring Donald Trump an insurrectionist and setting up a barrier to him being able to become the president of the United States. Green's tweets are just as incendiary. While she isn't likely to succeed in deposing Johnson and is fast becoming a joke even among her GOP colleagues in Washington, Green, like Gaetz, has extensive reach in MAGA. Green and others continue railing at Johnson for failing to fulfill his promise to secure the border, even knowing that Trump won't let Johnson do a border deal before the election. A great excuse not to vote to arm Ukraine and to make Johnson a punching bag. As for the former president himself, Trump didn't explicitly oppose Johnson. Trump hinted at the possibility that the Ukraine support be structured as a loan. We're thinking about making it in the form of a loan instead of just a gift, but didn't exactly endorse that either. And given his past record, it appeared as if he intended to dodge getting beaten on the issue. He posted before the vote that defending Ukraine was important to us, something he never says. At the same time, he questioned, again, why Europe wasn't spending more, insisted, again, that the war would never have happened if he was president, and implied, again, that it wasn't in our national interest to defend Ukraine since we have an ocean between us as separation. He wondered why we defend Germany since they run massive budget surpluses. They don't. We know exactly where this is going. If Trump is reelected and Russia invades a NATO country, Trump will not send American forces in to protect our allies and defeat Putin. Not a chance. We also can expect Johnson to scurry back to Trump's corner on any issue he can as soon as he can. He's no hero. After the vote, he said, we got to this as quickly as we could, which isn't true. And Johnson will support Trump in all of his Putin-pleasing and continue to defend his lies. This is not a cleansing. But Johnson rejected Trump's dangerous isolationist, not really, policies on Ukraine and NATO and challenged them directly on the world stage. Johnson and his colleagues who choose not just to support Ukraine, but to speak out, have made a personal sacrifice to injure their careers. They have prioritized liberty and the preservation of the world order over their own political futures. Trump keeps lists, and we'll remember all of this, and we should too. All right, a good point and a good and stark warning. Let's see, other things that I wanted to turn to. See, this one is like really super long, and I don't even know if I have time to get through it anymore, but it says it's quite a lengthy read. But I do want to get to it since we were wondering what's happening in court today about whether or not the judge is giving consideration to the contempt charges. And I don't know. I don't think we're going to have time to actually read through it before we find out what happens in the contempt charges. But this was in Just Security. Norm Eisen, Karen, let's see, Agnifilo, I don't know, Agnifilo, maybe my best guess. Boy, that's a tough one. Andrew Warren, Jacob Kovach Goodman, and Sivan Watt. Okay. An April 25th piece, or updated on April 25th, originally published on April 22nd, under the title of Why Trump Will Likely Be Held in Contempt and What Then? I don't know whether we can get this, get all the way through this or not. Probably not, but maybe more immediately relevant than the other direction I was going to take. The other stuff will stay relevant for a little while longer. Let's take a look at this then. Run through it as quickly as we can. Trial in the people of the state of New York versus Donald J. Trump. The first ever criminal prosecution of a former U.S. president began on Monday, April 15th. Although the trial is still in its early stages, of course, still true, Trump has already run into trouble with a court gag order restricting his extrajudicial statements about trial participants. On the opening day of the trial, the office of the district attorney for New York, Alvin Bragg, sought an order to show cause, alleging that Trump was in contempt of court for violating that gag order. That same day, the court granted the order to show cause, meaning that the allegations were sufficient to warrant a hearing, which is set for Tuesday, April 23rd, and has since come and gone. Undaunted, Trump went on to make additional statements that prosecutors allege also violated the gag order. 3 days later, on April 18th, the district attorney submitted a supplemental filing identifying 7 more alleged violations of the gag order. The court issued an order to show cause the same day, again, finding the allegations were sufficient for the hearing to be held on Tuesday. That is last week. As if that were not enough, the DA alleged 4 new violations on the morning of April 25th, in which Trump made extrajudicial statements not only about Cohen, but even the jury and the witness who was about to resume testifying, David Pecker. Prosecutors sought a new order to show cause, as of this writing, on the 25th, the judge is considering whether to sign it. Below, we explain the gag order, the alleged violations, the legal framework. We then assess the strength of the prosecution's case and what may follow. And here we go. The gag order. In May of 2023, the court originally issued a protective order prohibiting Trump from disclosing on social media or elsewhere any discovery the defense received from the prosecution, as well as the names and identifying information of any personnel from the district attorney's office other than sworn members of law enforcement, assistant district attorneys, and trial witnesses. The latter could be disclosed only once jury selection began. In granting the protective order, Justice Juan Merchan, the presiding trial judge, explained it's certainly not a gag order, as Trump was allowed to publicly discuss the case. In February of 2024, the district attorney filed a motion seeking a narrowly tailored gag order to prohibit Trump from making statements outside of court intended to threaten, intimidate, or harass jurors, prosecutors, witnesses, or court staff. The motion contended that Trump's advocacy of revenge and retribution against perceived opponents justified such an order. The motion cataloged Trump's long history of verbally attacking people involved in legal proceedings against him and his allies, offering examples from this case, the D.C. federal criminal prosecution, the Georgia state prosecution, the New York civil fraud case, and the prosecution of Roger Stone. Trump opposed the motion, arguing it would be unconstitutional to restrict his political speech, especially when he is the presumptive Republican nominee for president. On March 26th of this year, the court granted, in substantial part, the district attorney's request to restrict Trump's prejudicial extrajudicial statements. Justice Merchan imposed a narrowly tailored gag order that prohibits Trump from making or directing others to make public statements about witnesses, district attorney counsel and staff, other than the DA himself, Bragg, or their families, or court staff or their families, and jurors. The gag order closely tracks the one adopted by the D.C. Circuit in the federal election interference case against Trump, here with additional protection for jurors. In granting the motion, Justice Merchan rejected Trump's argument that as presumptive Republican nominee for president, he needs to be able to respond to political attacks and criticize these public figures. The judge found that Trump's history of extrajudicial statements went far beyond defending himself against, quote, attacks by, quote, public figures, and included threatening, inflammatory, denigrating statements targeting local officials, prosecutors, court staff, and jurors performing their civic duty. The court concluded that these types of statements undoubtedly risk impeding the orderly administration of the court, with no less restrictive means to guard against that risk short of a limited gag order. The court's order is consistent with New York and U.S. Supreme Court law, which, in order to protect the administration of justice, allows a court to restrict a party's extrajudicial speech that is substantially likely to have a materially prejudicial effect, or that presents a reasonable likelihood of a serious and imminent threat to the integrity of the trial. On March 27th at 10:30 a.m., the morning after the gag order was entered, Trump mentioned Justice Merchan's daughter in a post on Truth Social in which he criticized the gag order, saying she was, quote, allowed to post pictures of her dream of putting me in jail. 1 minute later, Trump again posted about the judge's daughter, saying she, quote, represents crooked Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Adam Shifty Schiff, and other radical liberals. It was later determined that Merchan's daughter had not posted any such image of Trump. The false claim started with a prominent conspiracy theorist. On March 28th, the district attorney filed a letter asking for clarification that the gag order, which expressly covered family members of any counsel or court staff, was also intended to cover members of the judge's family. Trump responded, arguing that the gag order should not apply to the judge's family because his daughter was actively supporting adversarial campaign speech by Trump's political opponents. The district attorney filed a second letter on April 1st asking the court to expand the order if it was determined not to currently cover the judge's family. Trump made several more posts about Merchan's daughter in the days that followed, leading to the district attorney filing another brief on April 1st to curb what it described as Trump's dangerous, violent, and reprehensible rhetoric. It wrote, "There is no constitutional right to target the family of this court, let alone on the blatant falsehoods that have served as the flimsiest pretexts for defendant's attacks. Defendant knows what he's doing, and everyone else does too. And we all know exactly what the defendant intends because he has said for decades that it is part of his life philosophy to go after all his perceived opponents as viciously and as violently," that's a quote, "as he can." A quote from him. Trump responded, rehashing arguments that he had raised while challenging the existing gag order and rejecting the need for any clarification to cover the court's family. On April 1st, the court granted the DA's motion, clarifying the gag order to include the court's family. The judge wrote, "Trump's pattern of attacking family members of presiding jurists and attorneys assigned to this case serves no legitimate purpose. It merely injects fear in those assigned or called to participate in the proceedings that not only they, but their family members as well, are fair game for defendants' vitriol. To argue that the most recent attacks, which included photographs, were necessary and appropriate in the current environment is farcical." The court's April 1st order further stated that Trump was hereby warned that any violation of this order will result in sanctions under Judiciary Law Sections 750A3 and 751. The new order reads, do we want to go all the way through it? Well, look, you know what is prohibited here, including making public statements about counsel in the case other than the district attorney, members of the court staff and the district attorney staff, or family members of any counsel, staff member, or the court or district attorney if those statements are made with the intent to materially interfere with or to cause others to materially interfere with counsel's or staff's work in the criminal case, or with the knowledge that such interference is likely to result, etc., etc. Now, Trump's alleged violations of the gag order, all laid out here, I don't even know if we want to read through all of these. I mean, I think you kind of know what they are, but they are documented at length here throughout April, and often with screenshots of their posts on Truth Social. So now the law of contempt in New York. Let's hear a little bit about that. Contempt law in New York can be confusing, as there are three types of contempt under state law: criminal contempt under the Judiciary Code, which is here at issue. Then there's criminal contempt under the Penal Code and civil contempt. Criminal contempt under both the Judiciary and Penal Codes is intended to protect the public's right to the efficient administration of justice through a judicial branch that can enforce its own orders. But there are significant differences between the two and between them and civil contempt, including whether the remedy is designed to punish a violation, that's the point of criminal contempt, or to compel behavior, which is the object of civil contempt. So the Judiciary Code sections, which are at issue here under the gag order, the DA's office has asked the court to punish Trump for criminal contempt violations under sections 750 and 751 of the Judiciary Code. Section 750 covers disorderly conduct before the court, publication of a grossly inaccurate report of a proceeding, and, as the district attorney has alleged, willful disobedience of the court's lawful mandate. Section 751 provides for penalties for contempt, including a fine of up to $1,000 and or 30 days in jail per incident. Despite the name, criminal contempt under the Judiciary Code is not a crime. Criminal contempt proceedings under the Judiciary Code are neither civil nor criminal. They are sui generis, special proceedings to coerce future obedience or punish past disobedience. The order to show cause motion filed by the DA's office serves as the accusatory instrument. The hearing will provide the fact finding before the judge. They already had that, of course, who will have to find that the defendant violated the order beyond a reasonable doubt. Then, I guess, discussions of other sections that cover contempt of court, which are different, and it's important to differentiate between them, but not necessarily important that we spend time on it now. Next up, the analysis of Trump's alleged criminal contempt. To sustain a finding of criminal contempt under the Judiciary Code based on an alleged violation of the court's gag order, the district attorney must establish the following elements beyond a reasonable doubt. 1, that there was a lawful court order in effect, i.e. that the court had jurisdiction, right? 2, the court order expressed a clear and unequivocal mandate. 3, Trump had actual knowledge of the order's terms. 4, Trump violated the order. And 5, Trump's violation was knowing and willful. We review all 5 elements, although the inquiry is likely to focus on 2, 4, and 5. That is, clear and unequivocal mandate, Trump violated the order, and that Trump's violation was knowing and willful. We focus the analysis only on instances 1 through 10 above, as the judge is still considering whether to issue a show cause order for 11 through 14 as of this writing. So 14 separate examples of alleged violations. So, again, we're running out of time here, but they go through each of the elements. 1, lawful court order in effect. Well, I mean, I think we can all agree that there's a lawful court order in effect. But yes, you have to analyze that, and I'm sure Trump will attempt to waste time by demanding some additional demonstration of the lawfulness of the order. The second, one of the more focused on, one of the things called out for focus, was the clear and unequivocal mandate question. The gag order does clearly and unequivocally express the mandate of the court, that's true, that Trump must refrain from, among other things, making public statements about known or reasonably foreseeable witnesses, etc., right? And making public statements about any prospective juror or any juror in this criminal proceeding. Let's see. Trump's statements are undoubtedly about known witnesses in the case, such as Michael Cohen and Stormy Daniels, as well as prospective jurors. So, again, and not only clear mandate, but clear violations of the mandate. We'll skip down to, element 3, of course, was actual knowledge of the terms. I mean, come on, it's his trial. They've undoubtedly been explained to him by his lawyers. Element 4, violations of the gag order. We've actually seen those, and those are laid out 1 through 14 in the article. We skipped over that part, but you've all seen the things he's been tweeting or putting out on Truth Social. And then number 5, Trump's disobedience was willful. You know, that's where all criminal prosecutions, although this isn't a criminal prosecution, as was pointed out earlier, where all of these things hang up, right? While the terms of Merchan's order may be plain, if Trump honestly misunderstood its terms or parameters, then there can be no finding of willful disobedience. That's the state of the law on this thing. But just as it is with everything, he could pretend that he misunderstood, but it would be awfully hard to convince the court. And that's all that matters in this case, the court. There's no jury decision on this. It'd be awfully difficult to convince this court that what he's done was without understanding and not willful. It was an accidental defamation, I guess. Trump's attorneys will, of course, raise the idea that the language of the order is sufficiently ambiguous that Trump could not have been certain that the conduct was forbidden, so he could not have acted willfully. That's going to be the argument. In fact, as they explain in the article, the wording of the order is sufficiently definite to rule out the possibility, the authors say, that these violations were inadvertent or mistaken. What's going to happen? Well, we'll have to wait and see. But there's a whole section on this one. And maybe, well, since we've come to the end of our time here and need to hand things over to Justice Putnam, we will find out what will happen before we can read the prediction. But at least you'll know, one way or the other, what the court had to consider in making up its mind. All right, time now to hand things over, like we said, to Justice Putnam, and we'll get back to the issues swirling around the protests around campuses around the country as well, probably tomorrow, and perhaps get a chance to check in with Joan McCarter as well. After this, a little teaser of what comes up next.
Networksradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Here's what he's got for you today. Let's see. Mark Elias discussed the GOP's dangerous attorney swap and what it will mean. Let's find out about that. Let's see. On the rest of the menu, a federal judge sentenced a longtime DEA agent to 4 years in prison for leaking agency intelligence to defense lawyers in a $100,000 bribery scheme. Wow.